Okay, welcome everyone. We're now being recorded. And we have myself, Morgan, Nancy, Terry, and did anybody else join us? Anybody else on the line? Okay, so the four of us are going to be reviewing Satya, and then that's truthfulness, and going on to non-stealing Asteya. So I actually wanted to start with a quote today because we've all been part of the extreme violence that happened in Connecticut. And I wanted to share a poem that actually brings me a lot of peace. And this is actually in your book, in the Yamas and Niyamas, and it's After Ahimsa, Nonviolence. And one thing that is especially profound to me about this quote is that Edie Halicium, who was a young Holocaust victim, this is her quote. And so it says, ultimately, we have just one moral duty, to reclaim large areas of peace in ourselves, more and more, and to reflect that towards others. And the more peace there is in us, the more peace there will also be in our troubled world. Sending that poem out to Newtown, Connecticut, and bringing that idea of what we can do from here is bring more and more peace into our inner landscape and support those in ourselves in this holiday. We can bring the piece about Newtown is actually quite, it's a huge act of healing. So maybe as we get into our call more after we've checked in with truthfulness, to act what happened at the elementary school is a huge act of healing. And so hopefully what we're going to do now is unpack a little bit about some new insights you had about truthfulness. And then after we do that, we'll hopefully get into a lecture and a conversation about unpacking and looking at a bigger, broader idea of what possibly is healing in our world. So I would love it if you have your book to turn to the end of truthfulness, where the questions are. Who has their book of the three of you?
I do. I do as well.
So do two of you or three of you? Everybody have one?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, what I'd like to do is just to put it out on the platform. So we're on page, is everybody on page 57?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we each take one week and read it out loud, and then after that we can each share a nugget we learned last month. So I'll start with week 1. And this week, observe the difference between nice and real. Notice situations where you were nice. What did this experience invoke in you? What were the results? Notice situations where you were real. What did this experience invoke in you? What were the results? From who or what do you seek approval? Does this affect whether you act from your niceness or from your realness? Like week 1, that was what we were uncovering and packing. And how about, Morgan, would you be willing to read week 2 for us, please?
Sure. Week 2. Spend this entire week in self-expression. Make movement towards the external world with your internal hopes and dreams. Act on life-giving opportunities despite the consequences. Observe what happens to you. Observe how others react. If you find yourself in self-indulgence, ask yourself, what am I not accepting?
Thank you. And then week 3, will you read that, Nancy, please?
Sure. This week, pay attention and go slow enough that you do it right the first time. Make this a week where you don't have to backtrack to apologize or correct mistakes, and where you don't learn from any hard tasks that present themselves. Face each moment head on with clarity and courage.
Thank you. So Terry, you're up with the last one.
Okay. This week, look at ideas and beliefs that once served you and now have become archaic. You may unknowingly be holding on to things that you no longer need. Honor these beliefs because, like a vehicle, they brought you to your current place on your journey. As you let go of what no longer serves you, pay attention to where denial shows up and celebrate your movement toward a clearer, more authentic you. Watch how this exercise frees up your energy for the further emergence of your authentic inner light.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do to unpack truthfulness, Satya, for us is have each of you share an aha or a change that you made or noticed or an experiment you did in this last month with truthfulness, and what were your new understandings from those experiments or pondering? And anyone can go first.
Go ahead, Terry.
Um, of course, there's a long pregnant pause, and then we both decide to talk at the same time, right? Okay, so I guess, and this came up the other day, my belief about, it was really hard for me at the beginning of the month to consider my unexamined beliefs, right? Because they're unexamined up till now. And so even to notice what they are, but it's been coming to me more and more as the month goes on, which is cool to see. And one of my beliefs really that came up as I'm in this position of a student again is being my mom's a teacher, and a lot of value was always put on our education, and we're always taught to be good students. And so I've been thinking about what that means to me being a good student, and what I really need to bring into that. And I feel like I'm just now learning critical thinking. And not that I didn't use critical thinking before in my life, but I don't think I ever did it in a really conscious way. And so the way that we're being encouraged to experiment with things and examine things really, like, that's what it is, right? That's what critical thinking is. So bringing that to my beliefs of what it is to be a good student.
Well, congratulations. Critical thinking is exciting.
Right?
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
Nancy. I think there's so much I feel like I personally learned throughout really all of these explorations. But if I were to kind of sum it up, if as few as possible, I think through all of these practices this month, I feel like I'm learning more compassion, whether it comes stemming from, the whole realness versus niceness, and, whether it's compassion to myself when I, am practicing one or falling into, the niceness versus the realness, or just engaging with other people, noticing, is this realness that I'm seeing or not? And then if it's not the realness, then what can I do to kind of help create the environment that allows another to be real? Create that safe net so that what they're getting from me, they feel equally protected to be able to offer, back. And then even just that the whole do it right the first time. I mean, that again was so meaningful in all of the simple, like I wrote in the posting, all of the simple interactions that we have. And I really noticed it one morning. And it wasn't that I was busy or late or anything like that, but I was much more just to myself. I was just much more in my person. And I walked through the skywalk to get to work, and typically when I pass people in the skywalk, whether I know them or not, I acknowledge them, just as a human being. And that morning, I really didn't. And I have no excuse for why I didn't, but I didn't. And it really dawned on me as I was contemplating the day. It's like, what was that all about? And what opportunities did I miss? And now I don't have that moment to go back to make that right from one human being to another human being. So even a simple, tiny little example like that kind of was a little bit of a wake-up call that again, back to that, it's every single moment along the way. And that moment passes with every breath that we take. And we don't necessarily get that back. Sometimes we get it back in a
agree, where we can go back to a person to apologize or what it might be, but many moments we don't. So that's been powerful for me this last month.
Thank you.
Well, I guess that makes it my turn to share, and I've been finding recently, and perhaps it's with what just happened last week, but I've been grieving a lot. I find in my morning practice that tears come quite fluidly, and as you were saying, Nancy, compassion has been a focus for me in my quiet time and sitting, and exploring what that truly means in very difficult situations, and having a heart that is wide and spacious enough to embrace all of these things in a real way, an authentic and truthful way, and to feel it all, so perhaps as I'm looking at these weeks and thinking of truthfulness and what that means in grief and challenge, but touching those difficult places as well with a loving kindness in my own heart, even for things that I feel like.
Beautiful.
And I was thinking just one last comment. I've been sitting with one of my calming writers this week, the poem Calming by True Name. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that poem.
No.
It's just to make it brief here, it goes kind of in and out of being all of these different emotions, the suffering and the kindness. And he talks about being like a pirate on the sea, and perhaps a victim of some of the pirate violence or
Morgan, would you be willing to post that up on our Basecamp? Oh.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that, and it's just to outline. It's not very like it's not just a one-liner.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to post it.
Thank you. That'll be wonderful. And everybody can have it. So I would check in too. So for me, with truthfulness, the one that I really was pondering a lot this month was do it right the first time. And I don't know if you all were online today, but Katinka, she made a comment on it, and I loved her comment because it really was something that I was hoping people would kind of ponder and figure out through the month. So what I noticed when I first started working with Do It Right the First Time was I was thinking that I had to do that perfectly, and you'll see that that's what Katika wrote. She's like, oh, I thought that meant you have to do it perfectly. And what she wrote is like, wow, that actually stagnated my process, and that's what I have found in myself. So when I think I have to do it right the first time, like in using the right as perfect, then that actually stagnates my energy and makes me more congested and not as fluid and free. So for me, um, that idea of show up to each moment as best as I can and as truthful as I can, and using that idea of the word right more as like show up truthful, like show up really with the amount of energy I have, really with the answer that's in my heart, really with the boldness of proceeding right now rather than figuring it out perfectly and then coming back around and doing it perfect right, if that makes sense. So that has been really freeing for me to manipulate that word right into more as like a word of authentic rather than I think sometimes we interpret right as perfect. So I just wanted to say that was a really big piece I was working with, and I notice on a continual basis when I get stagnated or bogged down, it's because I think I have to do it with precision and completely lay it out, otherwise I can't even keep going. And so I wanted to make clear that we, ponder that word right and what does that mean. So that was one discovery and piece I was really pondering. Any last comments about Satya, truthfulness, before we move on to our third tenet?
This is Morgan, and thank you for what you just said. I struggle with it with the word right in that classic, so I adapted it a bit as well to thinking about what is my truth and what is my truth. And this one perhaps fits the accent and say, if I felt I had this quality, I would have adapted that and used it in my life. If that helps clarify.
Perfect. Good, good. Any other last comments? All right, then let's move into our commentary on Asteya. So Asteya is the Sanskrit word for this tenet, and the English translation is non-stealing. So hoping that we could walk around in the world in a good reciprocity and not taking more than we need or always being the one that is taking and not really giving. So we're going to open up this word a little bit. So we all know about gross forms of stealing. If I snatch your purse or if I dine and ditch or those grosser forms of stealing. And we might all say, oh, I don't do that. I don't steal people's stuff. I'm respectful of their property. But this is, I bet by the end of the conversation, and maybe you'll throw in your comments as we go, and hopefully you'll explore it through the month, you'll realize, wow, I steal every day. So this is what has happened to me. I started to realize, wow, I steal every day. And none of us want to think that we steal, but as we start to unpack this, you might start to uncover, wow, I never really had pointed to that situation as being a choice of stealing. And so we're going to talk about several different areas. We're going to talk about stealing from others. We're going to talk about stealing from ourselves, stealing from God. And if you don't like the word God because it has a ripple for you, pick a different word. Stealing from the universe, stealing from the world, the earth. And then the last comment we'll talk about is called adhikara. And adhikara is a Sanskrit word. And the translation of adhikara is the right to hold or the right to know. So I will really talk about that in much more detail, but that's going to be the last part that I cover. So we're going to go back up to some easier topics before adhikara, and let's go to stealing from others. So there's lots of ways that we tend to do this. So we can steal from others through one-upmanship, taking away other people's successes, taking up more time, taking their attention. These are all ways that we do stealing from others. And I think actually this is kind of a great tenet to be studying this month in the holiday gift-giving season, both one in watching this consumerism of the holiday and that, like, are you even spending more than your budget can allow for? That would be a way that you would be stealing from yourself. Or also watching interactions at your celebration. So notice in your celebration, do you go to celebration and maybe Aunt Bertha always talks the whole dinner, nobody else gets a word in edgewise? That would be Aunt Bertha stealing the community's ability to have conversation and community because she needs to have the show. That makes sense. So she's in attention-wise, Aunt Bertha would be stealing from the whole community. And so as I speak to these, I'll give some examples from my own life and from things that I've learned. But also, please feel free to chime in if you have an example that you think would be supportive to the rest of the group. So I'll dive into this one a little bit more, through one-upmanship. So what do I mean by stealing from others through one-upmanship? I used to work in a school district, and I'm going to use a story about children because it makes the story a little bit more fun and playful. So we were sitting in a circle, and we were just back from summer vacation, and I had said, what did you all do that you were excited about this summer? And so they got to share with their peers what they were excited about. And one little boy shared his name, and then he said, I went to Ohio to see my grandparents. And so that was his story. And then the next little boy shared, and these were like the little tribe of friends that were always kind of in this slight, gentle competition. The next boy said, well, I got to go to Disney World. And then the next little boy said, well, I went to Africa. So it was just an example. Do you see how they each one-upped each other? Now, the final boy didn't really go to Africa. He just was trying to make it bigger and better than his friends prior. So now that's a playful story about that. And I sat there and I giggled. I was like, oh, look at this. It's really fun to see. And then I thought, oh, and how do I do this in my own life? So have you ever had a situation where you're maybe having a conversation with someone and they're telling you about something they're really excited about, and then you say, I know exactly what you mean, and I did this and that, and this happened to me, da-da-da-da-da. And you go into your story, and all of a sudden, all the attention and the focus goes to you, and that person then kind of starts to get less enthusiastic. They seem to have more drained energy, and they almost feel like they're speechless. Anybody have that situation?
Yeah.
So that's an example of probably in that moment you were one-upping yourself from that person, and you stole a little bit of what they were sharing by saying, well, I know exactly what you're talking about, and in fact, mine is grander and bigger and more sorrowful or more delightful. So see if you do that this holiday, or if somebody does it to you. And there's a fine line here, so I want to be clear. Sometimes when you share back and forth, there's a synergistic energy, and you can feel it. You can feel both of you are getting more and more excited, more interested in the topic. You're feeling like you're kindred spirits. That's beautiful. So please continue to do all of that. But when you start to notice the energy of, then you started talking more, and by the end of the conversation, you've had the whole conversation, or your story was bigger and better than that person, and their energy has become depleted rather than energized or synergistic, then that's probably a moment you stole in that conversation rather than enhanced. Is that clear?
Yeah.
And we can even do it with sorrowful things, a death of a loved one. Then, because we're not comfortable sitting sometimes in someone else's sorrow or someone else's story, so then we'll quickly shift it over to us, like, well, when my mom died, this is what I did. And in those moments when we try to quick go to fix it or make it right for them, do you see we're stealing even their process by thinking we know a way for them, which they have yet to discover their way. All right. Any questions about that one or comments? This is stealing from others through one-upmanship. Hello, did someone join us or did someone leave?
Hello, this is April.
Hi, April, welcome. We're in the middle of our conversation, so I will continue to lecture and you can join us. So we have myself, Morgan, Nancy, Terry on the line, and now April's joined us.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yep. So the next one we're talking about with stealing from others is taking away others' successes. So sometimes our ego can get a bit jealous when somebody else has a success or things are going right for them, or they're learning, and we sometimes interrupt their learning with thinking we have more to share than they need, and we want to even share more. So see if you start to take away others' successes by inserting yourself and not just sitting and going, that's fantastic, I'm so happy for you, and just taking a moment to pause and sit in the glory of their success? Do you quickly try to add on to that or not acknowledge them and get pouty even sometimes because it didn't happen to you or jealous? So see if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're even struggling a little bit to celebrate someone else's success. So I sometimes find this in teacher training. I get pretty excited. So sometimes my ego starts to get really excited when somebody, like when a penny drops and somebody gets a concept that I'm hopefully trying to convey in the teaching. And so sometimes one of the teacher trainers will have a discovery. And sometimes instead of just sitting and letting that discovery be complete and 100% perfect, my ego will start to get excited. And then I will start to add in more layers. Like, okay, so you got that piece, then what about this piece and that piece and this piece? And I start to add in these different pieces, thinking, well, then they'll really get how dynamic this is. And I have to pause and go, more dynamic for who? You see how that's a moment where my ego teacher gets so excited that she starts to jump in. And sometimes the jump in is more than the person is really ready to learn or absorb. So there's a way that I stole from their perfect aha. Does that make sense? So maybe you just where you do that. Sometimes we do it with children, sometimes we do it with colleagues, sometimes we do it with our loved ones, friends. So see if there's any time that your ego has to jump in and steal the show, for lack of better words. So some things we can do instead of doing that is we can practice celebrating instead. So someone says something they're really excited about, keep listening, ask more questions, let them glow, let them radiate, let them have their aha. It's like let them have their 10 minutes. And then guess what? What's really fun about this, Yogi Bhajan talks about this. He says, be a forklift. So he's talking about being a forklift for people, that when somebody's with you, do they leave feeling more bright, more enlightened because they spent time with you? And the thing that I have found interesting, this should be a great experience for the holidays. So you're at a party, a cocktail party or something, and you're talking with somebody. And if you do this, if you do the listening and asking a deeper question and really letting them glow and radiate and share their ahas and their excitement, at the end of the 10 minutes, they'll say, oh my gosh, it was just wonderful talking to you. And they'll be so enthusiastic, and they won't even really know why, but it's because you just really listened to them and witnessed them. So it's a fun experiment to do, especially if you're at a party and you're ready to go home and maybe your partner's not ready to go. Do some of these experiments. So another big way that we steal from others is time. Are you always late? Are you always early? Do you overstay your welcome? Do you expect someone to give you time without reciprocity for their time or talent? And so just notice how do you and what do you expect of people's time and where. Maybe there's a certain area that you steal. So maybe there's like, I'm really great with computers in that I always need Molly to help me with the next step of the computer use. So do you see how in that way, every time I keep lacking the skill I need, I'm stealing her attention and time to support my competency. So that's an area that I'm aware of, and I have to keep working at edge so that I can stop that stealing in that example. So another way we steal from others, this one is great. I talked about this with Aunt Bertha before you got on, April. Pay attention to your airtime. So what I'm talking about with airtime is, so say you're actually sitting at a table with 4 people, and say there was equally an hour. Did you relatively all get to speak in that hour and have, the relatively 15 minutes or reciprocal conversation? Or did somebody talk the whole 55 minutes and then people were squeaking in at the end with comments? So see if this happens at your holiday celebrations. And then if you do have somebody monopolizing a conversation like this, what you might you do at that guest table to see if you can open it back up. And those are courageous moments, aren't they? Those are those courageous moments. And then the last one with stealing from others is attention. So when do you, just need the attention to come back to you rather than letting that person have the attention on them? So I had a really interesting experiment. At one point in my life, I had a partner, and he was a singer, and he had polyps. So this was actually during the holiday time, so I remember it really well. But he had polyps, which is like little nodules on your vocal cords, and he had to do voice rests, and then he actually had to have surgery and not speak at all for over 4 months. It was so interesting to me, and he was like a funny guy. He was always like the life of the party, doing funny jokes, and make people laugh. And what was so interesting was in those 4 months, we still went to social gatherings, but in that time, I was amazed at how much people got to know me because he couldn't speak, right? So then I started to realize, oh wow, I really don't always put myself in the conversation. I sometimes just let the ride. I just follow the ride rather than sometimes inserting myself in. And the thing that was pretty neat about that time, I mean, it was very challenging in ways too, but one of the silver linings was our friends and family, and especially his family, got to know me in a more intimate way because people had to talk to me because he wasn't talking for 4 months. I mean, isn't that a rare situation to be in? But it really was an eye-opener with this idea about stealing or non-stealing. Anybody have any comments about that? That's stealing from others.
It's happening all throughout the day.
Doesn't it happen throughout the day?
Mm-hmm.
Already, Nancy, you can say, oh my gosh, I steal all the time, or get stolen from all the time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
One thing, I think we may have talked about this earlier, somehow it came up, but one thing I have been aware of is, let's say, going to a colleague and meeting and talk with them, of asking first, do you have a few minutes to talk about this? And not expecting that they have that time. So that's been one little practice that I use, which I've appreciated when people have approached me in that manner as well. So
yes,
kind of an interesting piece of this feeling.
Beautiful. And even doing that on the phone, right? Like when you call somebody, say, do you have a moment to speak now? Or should we make a meeting for later? It's really quite simple, and it is much more respectful for everybody's time. Beautiful. Another one I wanted to share with others is notice the fairness piece. So having to be fair, and I'm having fair be in quotes there, can really make it so it's absolutely not fair and someone gets stolen from. I have a funny example in my family of origin. My mom there's 5 daughters, and she always felt like it needed to be fair in gift giving. And so even think about this holiday coming up. Oh, I think you mentioned this I heard Nancy say this somehow, I think, sometime in the last month. But this is funny about weddings. My mom felt like when everybody got married, they should all receive a sewing machine. And so she gave that to the first daughter, and then for every daughter after that, everybody received a sewing machine so that it would be fair. But the thing that was crazy about that decision was no one sewed. And so all of those sewing machines have forever sat in their closet, or they've given them away, and they were never used. So the unfortunate thing in the idea of umbrelling under I need to be fair, no one really got to receive none of the couples really got a true gift. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? So just even notice if this is bubbling up for you this season. Maybe you have 3 main people you're buying for, and you feel like you should be fair. Like, okay, that person needs to have this much, and maybe I need to get them one more little thing because Joey has so much more, and Alex has that much more than Joey, so I've got to really make this fair. So just see. And then the other thing, sometimes our egos will jump in with, we can't, back to celebrating somebody else's successes. Sometimes, like if somebody's receiving something they've really wanted for a long time, our ego can hardly stand it. They're getting it. And then we'll have to jump in and get something too to be fair. And it kind of steals from that person's celebration of their new purchase or opportunity. So here's a couple tools. I'll give you a couple tools here. One thing that Deborah says in the book, she says, in all the instances that I've just spoken about, we have made the situation about us and not about the other person. So when you're specifically talking with others, this is in regard to the other people, make sure, who are you saying it for? Or is it more about you, or is it more about them? Now, we are going to get into stealing from self, because that's a huge one. That's probably one you do every day. So we'll get to that too, but we're just not addressing it in this section. So a couple things to do here with stealing with others is watch your own ego. Who are you saying it for? Yourself, the other person, the group, the community. So sometimes when I'm not sure if I should say something, I'll pass it through that filter, like, why am I going to say this? Is it going to be supportive to the community? Is it going to be supportive to that person? Is it all about me? And then that will help me sometimes decide to share a story or not share a story. Like I said, practice lifting people up, being the forklift for people. If you start to get a little bit lost, always returning to breath awareness and trying to figure out where to move next. Like sometimes if you notice with Aunt Bertha monopolizing the conversation at dinner, you might start to have less of a breath. You might start to constrict your throat. You might start to get a headache because you're starting to feel tension because you're dissatisfied with how the conversation is going. So what's a little experiment you could do to try to open both back yourself up? Breath awareness would be a great place to start. And then what creative new thing could you try so that others in the room could be heard, including yourself? And then obviously, like people have already mentioned, practicing compassion and humility. And then just the last one I'll say about is celebrate with others rather than stealing from them or sabotaging their opportunities. So the other thing we're going to look at in this chapter is stealing from the earth and stealing from the future. And I think this is huge because obviously with all the crisis going on in the earth, I once heard a quote that said, if we continue to use resources at the rate we're using them now, and this was a couple years ago that I wrote this down, by the year 2025, we'll need 3 Earths to support the kind of consumption we are now using. So that's a powerful statement on the level of consumption we are, especially in America, requiring and what the Earth can actually sustain. So just even begin to look at how am I reciprocal in walking with the Earth? And can you add some pieces of reciprocity that maybe you haven't thought of? When we've talked about it, in America, we're pretty much bred to be in this place of greed. And this is the perfect time to notice it. I was thinking actually about Laura Ingalls Wilder times. I used to read those books to my son, and I was thinking about Christmas then. And do you remember these books? Or if you watched the series? Like, Christmas was Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and they got like an orange and a penny and a peppermint. And maybe Mom made them some wool mittens. And they were super excited, and it was a joyous, wonderful thing. And it wasn't like, from Halloween until December 24th, right? So I was thinking about that, even how we feel from ourselves. Like, does anybody else have this pressure where they're thinking, okay, I got to get ready for the holidays? You still have the same workload. You still have all the things. It's not like you've taken 2 weeks vacation to get ready for Christmas. Right? But you should. So we still have all the same obligations, but then we have this whole new cultural expectation around Christmas. But we really haven't created time to serve that expectation. So then all of us are kind of going crazy. And is anybody else finding that interesting? And then how you beat yourself up, like, oh, I haven't gotten those Christmas cards out yet. Oh, I really wanted to get Aunt Lucy this, and I haven't gotten to that store yet, and blah, 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 blah. And you're that self-talk just badgers away at you.
It's been a really great opportunity, this is Nancy, to practice being kind to myself.
Yes,
very good. That I had intended to get done last night and didn't, and I just had to say, it's okay. It didn't get done, and now it won't be done, and that's just okay. That's how it's going to be. and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So it's been a great practice for everything that we've been studying.
Perfect. Yeah, good. And isn't it, it's like the awareness is the first step in that, isn't it, Nancy, where you're realizing, oh, wow, maybe 2 years ago without doing this study, I would have just pushed myself to get it done and then been exhausted for work this morning. Instead, I just said, no, it's okay. It's going to be beautiful and, just perfect.
Exactly right.
Yeah, good.
Critical.
Yeah. I also, I think it's in the Native American tradition, and if anyone knows for certain, please correct me, but they talk about stealing from, like, the idea they say is make your decisions in an idea of what will the next 7 generations receive. So all things that we're doing now, in 7 generations, what will they be receiving from my actions of today? So that's a way that, as I understand it, the Native culture would try to keep themselves more in check with their level of consumption or greed or taking from the earth or their community. Okay. Well, the next one is stealing from ourselves. And I bet you all of you have already been doing this month, right? So stealing from yourself both in time, demands, expectations. Anybody notice that their to-do list is way longer than they have the amount of time in the day? And then you keep demanding more of yourself, and then you don't get all those to-do lists done, so then your expectations of yourself, you kind of give yourself a little, well, you didn't get that done, so and now what are you going to do? And so all the ways that you steal from yourself, and even all that I talked about, like in detail that I talked about with others, you might be stealing from yourself. So maybe at your celebration, you're the one that's always quiet as a mouse. Maybe it's your time to be bold and share something that was exciting about your year, or get yourself out there and share so that you can be, one of the reciprocal people in the relationship and in your community. So start to pay attention to different ways you steal from yourself. Do any of you have in your discipline, like the number one way you tend to steal from yourself?
Definitely. This is Terry, not like accepting compliments at face value. But that's also stealing from the person who's giving you the compliment and, kind of invalidating their feelings that they might not be genuine or something.
Beautiful. Great example. Anybody else have a comment that they can think of how you're one of your favorite ways to steal from yourself?
This is Morgan, and I was thinking that my storyline of self-criticism or self-judgment is the way that I feel for myself. Perhaps I wasn't beating myself up over not doing something. I could actually focus that time on getting what I wanted to accomplish done.
Excellent.
So working on the storyline.
Right, just filling it in a little bit more, making it yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking a lot back to a workshop that I went to like 2.5 months ago it was, and it was about writing therapy. So like being able to write your story down as a way to overcome traumatizing events and things. I don't know what I was expecting when I walked into it, but it was a workshop filled with, a lot of women, a lot of them in their 40s and 50s, case managers, public servants, and it made me really uncomfortable when people would start talking about, they would get genuinely upset about having a miscarriage or these traumatizing events that happen, and I would get like a little mad because, and I realized, I think I've been thinking about it a lot since it happened. Like, why do I react like that? And it really is tied in now. I'm realizing to like really being attached to feeling happy, and so then when these sad things come in, not not wanting to deal with them, like that's pulling me away from my happiness into sadness, and so no, I don't want to deal. But then it's stealing from myself and being able to experience like a broad range of emotions and have experiences, different kinds of experiences, and it's also stealing from the other person and not being able to like stand as a witness to their own pain or suffering.
Yes. Beautiful. So
I kind of figured it out because it was really bothering me. Like, why do I get so mad about that? Over disclosing or whatever.
Well, how beautiful that you stuck with it till you could articulate what it was, And then now that's in your awareness, so now you can start to work with that. So actually what Terry just started talking with us about is growing her adhikara. It's a beautiful example of growing your adhikara. So, like you said, when you only want to stay in the happy one dimension, then you miss all those other realms of being, and you lose the opportunity to witness somebody else in that place of being. So the more that you grow yourself to be a container to hold all of that, you become a more free being. You can walk around in the world more freely because you can be in all sorts of situations, right? You can be with all kinds of emotions and still stay more steady and easy and free. So do you see how now that you've uncovered that in yourself, Terry, you get to grow your adhikara to be a bigger container. You get to be more than just happiness.
Yeah.
You know. Lovely. Nice discovery. Deborah has a quote in the book. It says, in all the ways that we are imposing an outside image of ourselves onto ourselves, we are stealing from the unfolding of our own uniqueness. So another one that we talked about it a little bit, but time. Do you notice that you constantly, this is me, I'm good at this one, I constantly think I should be able to get more done in an hour than I really physically can. And so I constantly put myself up against this pressure that is so unrealistic. And it just creates this low-grade stress or disappointment at the end of, the time allotted. So we really need to, when we start to unpack some of these, it's actually good if you do have that tendency to actually schedule in time then to be about resting or digesting or contemplating so that you're not always doing these big acts of stealing. Because does anybody notice if you start stealing, then you steal more and you steal more, and pretty soon it's a landslide of stealing and you can't catch up with yourself. So actually, if you do have a hard time, you notice you steal a lot from yourself, maybe actually create time to build that skill in you or to build that which you want to become. So I talked about computer skills a little bit earlier. I started to realize this week, I actually need to schedule in time, a half hour here, a half hour there, and just say, this is my computer skill building time, so that I don't have to keep relying on others to manage this for me. So if there's some area that you think, wow, I always steal from others or myself, see if you can give yourself permission, be compassionate, and start to figure out what you need. Is it time? Is it skill? Is it a mentor? To then grow that piece of you so that you can be that bigger container, just like Terry so beautifully spoke to. So here's a little experiment, and I don't know if you're doing it or not, but we're going to invite you to close your eyes and find your breath and notice yourself. And please take the first thing that pops into your brain when I ask the question. So we're going to give a percentage to each question without thinking about it. So you're breathing, and you're going to ask yourself, what percent of the time do you spend in the past? What percent of the time do you spend in the future? What percent of the time do you live in the present moment? So you can open your eyes. And is anybody willing to share what they put for their percentages on past, future, and present?
This is April. I didn't really nail it down with a number.
Uh-huh.
But just responding off the cuff, I said, for my past, it's not much. For my future, it's some. And for my present, it's more.
Oh, uh-huh.
So that was what I used for percentage.
I totally get what you just did. That's beautiful.
And actually,
More is good.
I didn't know how it was going to come out. You know what I mean? But
Right. Well, that's kind of a fun thing. I know that's true, right? So anybody else that did put percentages on it?
I did. I put 60% in the past, 60% in the future, and 10% in the present.
Isn't that great?
130%, but that was spontaneously what came in my head. So.
Yeah, perfect. So that's fun, isn't it? I've done that too. Like how April did it because she wasn't sure about percent. She was ahead of all of us. I've done the same exact thing, Terry. But isn't that powerful to look at? To just even take a little snapshot and go, oh wow, okay, if I'm spending 60% in the past and 60% in the future and 10% in the present, okay, already I'm giving way more than 110%, which I don't even have. And whenever, right, just kind of comical, right? And then living in the past or the future, we're actually stealing from the opportunity of living this life in this moment. And that's pretty powerful and I think profound in itself.
I think too that it's circumstances where it's like in my work world, I have to live in the future, because
right.
I'm planning and you're preparing and everything, but then even applying that almost in my two separate worlds. What is my personal world versus my work world? And hopefully my present is more present in the moment, in my personal home life.
Yes.
Yeah, this is April, and when you said that made me think too, Nancy. It seems like my more present daily living that I do when I can creeps into my other stuff that would be more directed in the future, but it's actually has more present stuff because my plans keep changing. Like for my classes I teach, like if I teach Spanish, I find that it's never the same anyway. It's never the same class. And if I can bring my present awareness to my planning and to that whole everydayness of who I'm being there and what I'm doing there and what kind of environment I'm creating, that's really, it's always something brand new.
Beautiful. So that's really similar to a quote I wanted to share by Charlotte Joko Beck, and it's like, we always know what to do if we are in touch with life as it is. So your Spanish curriculum keeps changing because you're more able to bring in the present to teach from, right?
Yeah.
And then it's more
Not
robust and more rich.
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it doesn't mean that I think I'm perfect, because I'm really, really imperfect. You know what I mean? But I'm on a path, and then I'm noticing that being on the path just permeates, everything. Sorry for the interruption.
That's perfect. It's hard on the phone. Anybody else that wanted to share their past, future, or present? Okay, I'm going to go on. I have a quote here from page 79 that I wanted to share. It says, stealing from yourself manifests primarily in a lack of concentration. As your thoughts become more and more fractured, you will not be able to reach your goals, so you will never become the person you want to be. You have stolen the strength that will help you reach your goal. Morgan, that reminds me of you talking about the story you tell yourself, right? The more you focus on the story, the more you steal from that concentration and the strength to actually move towards that which you want to become. Okay, so we're going to move from stealing from ourselves. I bet you guys will find incredibly tons of opportunities to unpack that and do experiments in yourself this month. And the next one, the next bullet point is about stealing from God. And with this, it's a wonderful opportunity to pay attention to being a visitor in this realm. You hear in Scripture, everything is thine, nothing is mine. Even looking at in your community, what are things that I have resources to use for my pleasure, but I don't have to own, like libraries and parks and the wilderness and your work settings and your technology at work. All the ways that you get to use things without ownership. And then the other thing that's really interesting to watch with this one is the things you do own. How do they sometimes create bondage, or do they offer opportunity for you for freedom? So start to pay attention to that as well. I have a funny story with that, with things we own. So I had a $3 jacket from Goodwill, And the friend I was walking with had this beautiful black leather jacket that was, you know, it was like butter when you touched it. Like I couldn't stop petting her because it was such a beautiful leather jacket. And we had this spontaneous walk in the woods. And I was behind her, and we were walking, and I was just so free and enjoying it so much. And there were sticks, and there were things we had to walk around. And I watched her walking in her beautiful buttery leather jacket, and I'm like, oh, she's not free. Her jacket is stealing this opportunity from her because she's so worried about it getting a stick or a scratch that she had to be so precise in how she walked and moved that both her body became very mechanical, she wasn't paying attention to where we were walking, and she was really all encompassed on this jacket. So even see if you can find places in your life that you notice, oh wow, ownership of this is actually stealing from my presentness or from my opportunities, or owning this, is it supported and helping me move towards freedom and my goals. But it's a funny story, but I hope it helps you get the idea or the inquiry to look around your life for. And of course, before the walk, everybody would have, if we looked at my jacket and looked at her jacket, everybody said, I'll take hers. So the last thing I want to touch upon before we move on is building our competence. So, and it was wonderful because Terry's comment already has started to bring us down this path. And like I said, adhikara means, it's the Sanskrit word for the right to hold, the right to know. And so can we start acting as if? Can we start to become that which we want to hold? So just even think of yourself like a vessel. Devil's a good example in the book about being a colander. So just imagine you are a vessel, and what are your hopes and dreams in your life? Are you really the container ready to hold it, or do you still have, like the colander, some holes that you need to plug to gain skill and competency to hold that which you want to become? Does that make sense? So, for example, I'll use myself again with learning QuickBooks or the computer skills. I can keep wishing for the rest of my life, oh, I just wish I was better on a computer. I wish I could get this program right. But if I don't take, and so that's me with a colander, and just, you know, the water just keeps seeping through, and I can't seem to catch the skill. So what I have to do is I have to consciously become aware. I have to get a mentor. I went to a QuickBooks class. Then I have to take home the book and put it into practice. I need to consult with the accountant. So there's all these layers of things I need to do to build the skill to hold that job within Yoga North, if that makes sense. So if you could even take a minute to, if you have a paper and pencil, or if you don't have one, just do it with your mind's eye, and think of some of your hopes, your dreams, or your desires for your life. And write that down on a piece of paper or in your mind. Like, what is one that you have? Okay, so now when you look at that, is there any piece of that that keeps eluding you? And you don't understand why that dream or hope or goal isn't getting met, becoming more true or manifesting? And then the second invitation is just like write 3 bullet points under that, or in your mind, do 3 bullet points. What are 3 things that you could grow into to help you be more close to fulfilling that dream, hope, or desire? So I'll use the silly example of going to QuickBooks class, then hiring a mentor to help me with making sure I'm doing it correctly, visiting the program regularly. What are several things you need to put in place to become the container or the holder for this new skill? So the exciting, is everybody complete enough? You could come back to this project later, but does everybody have something down? So in yoga, what we're asking is for you to look at these spots in your life. So look at those bullet points and see where you're not taking 100% responsibility for your situation. And in those places where you're not taking 100% responsibility, are you falling into playing victim or blaming someone else or situation or Murphy's Law or that funny hat that says shit happens? And so instead, can you turn it around to become more skilled instead of going into the blaming or staying the victim? So you'll read this in the book. Our outcomes in life are consistent with our abilities, not necessarily our wishes or our goals. So sometimes we have loftier wishes or goals, but we still don't have what we need in place to make them a reality. There's a quote by Earl Nightingale that says, "All of us are self-made, but only the successful will admit it." Whatever successful means. So do people have questions about adhikara? This is the word adhikara. Well, I'll go through a couple bullets here of how to grow your adhikara. So we talked about a couple, like maybe hopefully you have a couple bullet points there of things that you could do to grow your adhikara to hold the life which you hope and would love to live. But some other things you can do is find out what new resources you need to become competent to hold that which is on your paper. You could find a mentor. How about whatever it is you want, putting consistent time in. So maybe you want to eat better this new year. And instead of just going, oh, I want to eat better and just leaving it at that, maybe consistently putting in 15 minutes a week where you're studying how to eat better. And maybe it's just 15 minutes, but 15 minutes over 365 days or 52 weeks. At the end of the year, that's something different than just keep saying year after year, oh, I want to eat better. There's a model called be, do, have. So sometimes we think we have to have it before we be it. But what if you just practice being that which you hope for, and then maybe that'll start to manifest for you. And another thing I do is I just show up. So I loved how Terry said sometimes she will keep compliments at bay. So she could now, one experiment you could do, Terry, is you could just flat blank say thank you, just automatically create a default thank you. I appreciate that. Like create something and then just practice that. Another thing I've done is if I've decided that if somebody asks me to do something, that means they must see the competency in me. And so without hesitation, I said yes. So one time it was someone wanted me to teach a group of women how to drum. I said, perfect, I will teach you how to drum. I had never took drum lessons. So that's a funny little story. But that's me just showing up, right? Just show up. You got asked to lead this prayer. You got asked to lead that conference. And if somebody else sees it and you trust that it's there. So another question you could ask yourself is, what am I doing to invent myself so I can hold my vision or I can hold my adhikara? So that is one of the biggest jewels of this tenet. The jewel is it asks us to build our competency in our lives. So whenever you see something that's not working in your life, you can examine it like, if I have 100% responsibility for this, how can I now then unwind it and look at it a little differently, grow the skill, get the pieces in place I need so that I can become this and flourish. Now, with all of that said, you might say, but Anne, things happen. Life happens. horrific things happen, and that is all true. So the skill you gain still makes you more skillful to move in many, many more situations, correct? Just like Carrie said, wow, if she can get more comfortable with sadness and sorrow and horrific things and exuberance and not just live in happy, you see how she's going to be able to walk all those lands with much more ease and grace. I started the call with the conversation about Newtown, Connecticut. And did anybody see the president's, he did two speeches on one he did a press release, and the second one he actually went to Newtown and was at the memorial service. Did anybody see either of those? Okay. Well, they're actually worth watching. I just looked them up on YouTube. But the reason I bring it up is it's an example of something horrific happened. And what Obama did was quite beautiful. He brought it back to, he had enough skill and enough wherewithal that he could be in the intensity of the horrific incident and still be about grace and skill and support and community and love. So do you see how it all still works? I mean, our life is going to come out multitudes of ways, and nothing usually looks like we think it's going to. But if you still create the adhikara to become your skillful self, you will also be able to be just as graceful as he and as authentic as he was in that horrific, details of talking to the families and the community. Does that kind of help think about that a little bit? Like thinking about, oh, okay, yeah, so it doesn't look exactly like when you wrote down your dream or your vision or your hope. It probably really won't look exactly how you just wrote it down. But if you keep putting pieces in place to become more skillful, when you arrive to your life, you will absolutely have more skill to hold that which is happening with more grace and ease and compassion. Any comments about that?
This whole section of this is Terry of the book just brought tears to my eyes. It's just really beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you. Well, it's pretty exciting, isn't it, to go, wow, I can be Swami Rama, and he's the guru from the Himalayan tradition, which Yoga North is steeped in deeply, says we are the architects of our life, and we are part, we create our destiny. That's a pretty big comment, isn't it? We are the architects of our life, and we create our destiny. And I think that this part of the book about Adhikar helps us to go, oh, wow, I can see glimmers of how that might be true.
Yeah.
And the exciting part about that is that we get more and more free rather than more and more in bondage. And as so many of you beautifully spoke to, we then get to be containers of compassion more than fear or hatred or greed or stealing. Well, it would be lovely to hear from each of you. We're going to close the call now. And if you can share one insight or comment that you're pondering at this time, and say your name and then that insight, and then we will close the call.
Well, I think just especially, this is Terry, sorry, about Adhikara, I was thinking really about how I had to work really, really hard to feel like in my job that I do, that I was doing a good job of it. it required so much of me. Super introverted, really shy, and like to be a supervisor and be a really introverted, shy person doesn't work well because people assume, I think, that I'm aloof, you know. And so I had to work so hard to grow as a person and to now see how, like, it's so funny because I wasn't doing it for myself. I was doing it for, you know, the sake of my job and feeling like I was doing a good job when I went to work. And now to see how that's changed my relationships with everyone in my life, like, it's just like, yeah, this really, it's, I don't know, really amazing. And so,
Cool.
yeah.
So it sounds like you grew your competency. You got to move into this new job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Terry.
Nancy, and all of these subjects, there's just like so much to it. But in a way, I kind of feel like my head is just spinning a little bit. But
Yeah.
I really feel like my first focus wants to be on building my awareness on how I'm feeling from others. And thinking about going into this holiday, we have a wonderful family gathering at our cabin that I'm really looking forward to. We'll have 14 people for, 4 or 5 nights. And I want to be so mindful of, the cabin experience and allowing everyone to have their own experience of what they need from our time at the cabin together, and not for me and my husband to kind of impose what we envision for this cabin experience to be like. So to me, that's kind of a first step in awareness of just letting everyone just be where they need to be and what they need to really take home from the wilderness, from their conversations with their family members, to all of that. So that's kind of where I'm at this one moment in time.
Thank you, Nancy. Would anyone else like to share?
This is Morgan, and I was thinking of a couple comments between cousins for the others, and one I've been thinking about that I've heard recently from one of my teachers is think your life and try going home for the holidays, and also another one about the days and family as they were teaching oneself. And as I think about the holidays coming up, one of the best gifts I think I can give myself and my family will be present in other times is to continue to work on getting that stuff and getting that forward as the situation presents itself. So I'm grateful for this reminder that I need to take that immediate action. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And April, do you want to share?
Are we sharing about non-stealing?
You just, if there's any insights that you want to work with from our talk today, if there's any insights that are uppermost for you in this moment.
Well, first of all, I apologize for coming in the middle. I got on at 11:30 because I thought we had a conference call at 11:30. So anyway, sorry about that. But I guess I liked all the ideas that I heard, and I think the President Obama presence is very inspiring to me because I think about like if I can, wherever I am in my life, if I can be, if I can come from a place of love at any given moment with whoever I'm by or even myself, then that will be a very important thing. So if I can just challenge myself to just think of the moment by moment opportunities and be aware of when they happen so that I can participate in them.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, I'm going to close our call with the quote from page 73, and it's the quote that leads our 4 questions for Asteya, non-stealing. And it really talks about the gratitude of all the life and all the energy we stand on to have this opportunity to move into our lives. It says, 100 times a day I remind myself that my inner and outer life depend on the labor of other people, living and dead, and that I must exert myself in order to give in the full measure I have received and am still receiving. So with that, have a wonderful holiday, everyone, and I look forward to hearing about your experiments with non-stealing online. And have a happy holiday.
Thank you. To enjoy the program.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Happy holidays.